Go.
All right. Welcome all to MCN Brandmasters, a series of hangouts with leading branding strategists of the cultural sector, sponsored by the Media Production and Branding Special Interest Group, co-chaired by Anna Chiaretta Lavatelli and me. And for our first meeting, we have a very special guest. She's a real globetrotter, out from the little villa in Castilla, Spain, who's been working in Barcelona, Amsterdam, and even in the deep jungle of the Amazon River. And that's true. From the past couple of years, she's been working at Lava Design, an amazing creative agency from Amsterdam, where she's co-founder and creator of LavaLab, mixing innovation strategy, design, and technology to engage and inspire organizations. Just the type of profession that we always love to hear. Cecilia Martin, welcome to MCN Brandmasters.
Hello, very nice to be here today. Thank you for the introduction.
And Anna Lavatelli is also with us, running in the control room. Hello, Anna. How are you?
Hi. I'm here monitoring the questions, and so any questions you ask, I'll be keeping an eye on the MCN Twitter, so if you hashtag MCNSIG, I'll look there, as well as in the questions window on the Google Hangout session. If you're watching on Google+, there's a window to the right of the video feed where you can pose questions to us, and I will read them back to Luis and Cecilia. So on with the show.
All right. So, Cecilia, in this series, we want to investigate how brands influence our culture and shape our actions as consumer and citizens. So I have to start by asking you if you think that Brexit, as this synthetic, clear, and straightforward brand, had any major influence on the British referendum yesterday.
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. I think, unfortunately for me, I think it has. I think that Brexit had very much a message to convey a call for action, and it had a very strong and powerful leadership. So that should have helped to engage more people and to call for support. So I think it has had played a role in the success of today. Yes, indeed.
And do you think that thinking about brands, that result can also influence somehow the American election, considering that Trump is a strong brand in the running?
Yeah, I think. Sorry, your question again was whether I think that Trump. Yeah.
It can influence the American election, considering that Trump is also a strong brand.
Yeah, I think that Trump made very clear his support for Brexit. So the winning of this referendum is just giving Trump more credit, I think, for what he stands for. So it definitely will influence, I'm sure. So it's a happy days for that side of the globe, I guess.
All right, Lo. So let's talk about more interesting things. And I have a question to you that I'm going to make to our guests in the show. As a branding professional, how you began working with museums and what interests you about these institutions?
Well, I am myself very passionate about culture, and I'm also an artist. At a certain point, I thought whether I wanted to bring my profession to the sector that I love, and I was already a brand strategist in the commercial world, and I thought that I wanted to specialize in what I'm interested in most, which is culture, and I wanted to make museums open up and engage with people. So I wanted to help in that mediation with people. So I was really intrigued and also challenged on how we can do this in the right way, and to lead this profession into the sector that at the moment was still quite virgin. So it was for me a very interesting approach.
Right. And do you have any favorite museum, considering this regarding as a brand strategist, do you have a favorite museum? There is a specific museum brand that attracts you and interests you?
Yeah, indeed. When I was working at the Philadelphia Museum of Art, I visited the Barnes Foundation, and I think it's a very interesting museum because I think that yeah, it's still very true to who he was as a person, and the replicas in the walls are exactly as the walls in his house. And I thought they did a very good job of putting it up into the walls and engaging with what his vision for art was at the time, very pioneer and censored by the city of Philadelphia. And
Right.
I think it was very interesting, as well as the Walker Art Center and what's their approach to their digital strategy, becoming less of a center and more of a everyday journal for art. So if you're interested in what's going on in the art world, you visit the website. So it's more like a newspaper. So I think they also did a very, very interesting job on how they brought their brand, creating a language that can be easily articulated, and not a straight jacket, which is the kind of dialogue that I'm interested in articulating through branding. Something that gives a framework for creativity and meaning, but it's not something constrained or something that is based on control and repetition, but it's just a starting point to establish meaning, behavior, and dialogue with your audiences.
Wow, excellent. So, all right, now Cecilia will share her screen for a quick presentation. And if you just turn in, this is the MCN Grandmaster Series.
I'm going to share my screen, so let me know how you think it works.
All right.
Yeah, 1 second. So, can you now see my screen?
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah, great. So this presentation is within the context of new generations and millennials, and I will explain in a minute why. And it's about moving fast enough. And as you already introduced me, I'm pretty much interested in innovation. And that's why I think we should catch up with what's going on in the outside world and partner with the young generations to move that change forward. So for everyone who is watching us, I'd like to welcome them and thank them to be here on a Friday. I'm originally from Spain, so if you're wondering what my funny accent is coming from, that's it, as Luis already introduced me. I'm the co-founder of the LavaLab, and although I am a brand strategist and I work in all the different aspects of branding, I call myself a risk taker. Because I think in the 21st century is more important how you do things and your attitude than what you actually do. And taking risk is what I do every day. I think that if you have everything under control, you're probably not moving fast enough. So I like to embrace uncertainty and vulnerability in any creative process. And that's why I always tell my clients that it's less about testing and more about having testicles and go for that. Because when you are doing innovation, most of the time you don't know where you're going until you get there. And that was a bit the driving motor when I started the LavaLab to bring innovation within technology and brands and strategy and design. And LavaLab is part of the creative agency Lava that is based in Amsterdam, and this is our office. Is a bit of a do-it-yourself environment, and it's never looking that tidy. Actually, it looks a little bit more like that. These are some of the members of our team, and we always welcoming people around the table and joining us. We are an open house, and we host a lot of interactive storytelling sessions. So what you see here is a group of creative coders from Amsterdam hacking the light installation that we had put up with by some artist collective from the UK. And so this is the result. They hack the lights and the coding. And we also host and run workshops to experiment with technology and audio and how can we make more interesting experiences around museums and artworks. We also look at design as a research, not only as an end product, and this is the work of Anja. She is a designer from Amsterdam who is doing a lot of work with voice recognition. So the voice sends a command to the printer, and this is what you see on the screen. And we also, of course, are exploring with virtual reality and welcoming the first documentary of photography in virtual reality, and looking about and thinking about design possibilities that this new virtual world can have, because it's still very virgin. We have offices in Beijing, because Lava is the kind of place that if you have an initiative, you just go for it. And one of our colleagues, Céline Lamé, decided to open an office in Beijing, and after 3 years, there she is. But not only we work in Beijing and Amsterdam, we also work in London, in Moscow, in Istanbul, and Los Angeles. So we're constantly on the move, and we like to think that our work agenda is more like a tour band, and we are kind of like a mobile design agency. And we don't believe in nations. That unfortunately today the course of history is telling us that we might be wrong. And we work a lot with cultural clients, and as you already touched, cultural brands are becoming more and more important, and you see cultural brands hitting the consumer brands. So people are getting more sophisticated in how they interact with brands, and many cultural brands are already being one of the top of mind from consumers worldwide. And this, of course, brings a lot of uncomfort sometimes, because is this that we are commercializing culture, or what is the approach that we're taking? In my approach, what I try to always convey is that what I try is to help people bring meaning and explain why you exist as an organization, as an institution, and what is the type of engagement that you are trying to build with your audiences. And everything that you do, try to give some structure to it, to find reason for being, and to articulate certain behavior. So I see it more as a platform for interactions, and I like to say that very often we talk about museums and museum visitors, and I think that instead of the visitors visiting the museum, I think the museum visits the public. So what happens with that encounter is what I'm interested in orchestrating. So I like to show you first 3 examples of our work. One of them happened in Moscow, Russia, and is the Moscow Design Museum. It's about how to make an identity be dynamic. We had the idea to, oops, sorry, I think something went wrong here with my slides. Yeah, so it's an example of what good branding can do for a museum that is not even open yet. It all started when we met Alexandra Zankova, which was a millennial. She is a millennial with initiative, and she had a dream. She wanted to open the first design museum in Russia. And imagine a country like Russia, which is full of design heritage. It was very
a great tradition, right?
Sorry?
A great tradition in design.
Yeah, they have a huge tradition in design. So it was very, yeah, very, where do you take it from? I mean, there are so many things to tell about Russian design. So, but fun enough, the Johan, the designer who was working on the project, find that in every Russian house there was this piece of glass, and this piece of glass has a pattern, and this pattern allows us to construct an identity around it that could be very, very flexible. And hold on, because I cannot put the, so it's difficult for me. No, okay. So based on this grid, we created a visual identity that was very flexible and recognized whether it was used alone or in combination in single items like t-shirts or billboards. You will still recognize the same visual language, but it's very flexible and very dynamic. And the idea was to create a museum that would be a bus, so that the museum could travel to people, and people didn't have to travel to museums. But although we didn't have a bus yet, hold on, I will show you this video on how it all works together. So in this video, you can see the amount of possibilities this visual identity gave. And so the idea was
But Cecilia, this is so cool. So the museum is a touring exhibition.
Yeah, exactly. So that was the idea. We wanted to make the museum travel to people. This was the starting point. And although we didn't have a bus or any other or a possibility to do that, we still decided to launch it and share it with the world. And we went off and asked, made a press release and share it with the world, because sometimes you need to do that to make ideas happen. And it was a great success. Everyone was very enthusiastic and got a great response, and the museum started to live online, and it became already a reality. And then suddenly, someone who owned a Russian bus donated to us, so we could actually go ahead and design it and make it a reality. So the museum started to tour and show exhibitions not only in Russia, but also in the Netherlands. And also this has been this year still on, and also in China, where people took the identity and brought it beyond the walls of the museum. So you can see how this language, it became something that people articulated and made it their own, and it had endless possibilities, and still it was very recognizable, and it was talking and it was sharing a vision of design, which was very interesting.
When was that?
This was made in 2013.
All
yeah.
Right. Is this still going on?
Yeah, now the museum is existing, as you can see in this exhibition taking place this year in the Netherlands and so on. Yeah.
Excellent.
And the next example that I want to show you is about the World Cultures Museum. It's an example, this happened in Amsterdam, in Holland. It's about how to break boundaries. And we, it came in the news that 3 big museums in the Netherlands needed to merge because of the crisis. So they needed to become part of one organization. So they have the National Museum van Wereld Cultuur became the organization that had to put together the Africa Museum, the Rijksmuseum, and the Volkskunde Museum, and the Tropen Museum. And it was kind of like an impossible brief, because they needed to maintain their profile but become one organization. So how did we tackle that? And we said, okay, this is the clear example of the kind of things we do within our brand strategy approach, to define brand scenarios and to really rationalize how you speak to people and how you orchestrate. So we say, okay, let's go for the scenario number 1, the monolithic. Everything is one brand. So you can have the organization, and then just like Tate Modern does with Tate Liverpool, and so on, Tate Modern, Tate Britain. So we look for a symbol that could exemplify the first signs of culture, and we develop some sketches on how it could work, and we explore, and we came to the conclusion not to do it, because In a way, you threw away 3 very strong brands. They are already positioned, they have their public, the audience, everyone knows about them, and the public doesn't really understand why. It's more something organizational driven than audience driven, because people are not interested in how you are organized. They're interested in visiting the museum, they connect with, they can engage. And it takes a lot of time to load a new brand, so it's a lot of investment. So we say, no, let's don't go this is a no-go scenario. So we say, okay, how about looking into an endorsement? So all the museums are linked together through some kind of endorsement. It could be through words, through letters, through symbols, or through type. And we looked into the possibility of creating a framework and putting the brands inside, but we decided, no, this is not the way to go, because the public don't understand it. There is no synergy between the museums, and the new brand has absolutely no meaning. So we say, kill it, and we went for the same option, which is create a family of brands. And they could be related and have their own individual profile and related by their visual identity. So we explored different possibilities, as you see, like a sandwich, or with this graphic system. And at the end, we created a visual language that connects all the activity, taking as a departing point that culture is a collective phenomenon in constant movement. So it's made by unique individuals that together are forming this global citizenship in which we are all part of, from our own individual, within our own individual approaches. So this kind of principle guided us through the implementation. So to have something very unique put together to create a whole, and we applied it to the typography, and this is how we created the different museums. So you have the Africa Museum, the Volkskunde Museum, and the Museum for the Tropen. So at the end, you had 3 museums, part of one family, which in a way is what our vision is for global and world culture. So individuals becoming part of a global. So at the end, you had one family made out of 3 components. And at the heart of it, we wanted to put people, because people are the drivers of culture. And we wanted to create a world culture museum that is from people to people, made of unique individuals creating this huge mosaic of world citizenship. And we apply that to also an understanding of world cultures beyond the current understanding, which is it's also about music styles, about punk, about pinup, about tribes. So breaking also open the concept of world cultures that we have right now. And we brought also all these visuals inside the museum and applied it to everything we did, giving it a very person-to-person approach, whether it was for newsletters or corporate folders. And we tried to go away from this image of world cultures that we sometimes have, that this National Geographic, this them and us, this exotic faraway lands, to make it more contemporary. And we also try to go away from something that will be very modern and edgy, and but it will not last long, or very trendy. And also this idea of world culture is very historical and ethnic that many museums have, to do something more contemporary, more relevant to us, to think about world cultures is also transsexuality, is also body art and how you use your body and how you relate to it. It's also the 60s, what happened in the 60s in Africa. Everyone thinks about the 60s in California, but what was it? It was a worldwide movement, and it happened everywhere in the world. So this opens up the subject of world cultures and gives us a more contemporary approach, and it makes us, all of us, be part of this world culture. So this was also the idea that the museums don't communicate alone, but in combination. But we failed to implement this approach because, for practical reasons, it's more costly. But this is how we try to also bring this idea of small elements together, creating a whole.
Well, let me make you a quick provocation here. You were dealing with 3 museums, but in fact, you're dealing with 3 different cultures itself, right? There's 3 institutions with different, maybe, views of the world and such, and how you manage to engage those individuals that worked on those museums in the process.
Well, it was, I think what helped is that because of this organizational merge, there was one director, and he had very strong drive and had managed to pull together the 3 organizations behind. So that really helped in the process. And but it was also, it took a long time to come together into building this, you know, image approach to build together this shared culture. And I think it's probably for them internally a process that might take quite a bit more time to fully implement it internally, because of course this is just a visual aspect of it, but what really matters is what happens internally within the culture of the organizations and how they come together under one approach. But the idea was for us that we will respect as well the individuality of each museum. Although we create a collaborative approach, we respect the autonomy that they had. So,
right. So they feel represented in the right.
Because this was the approach that we had towards the brand architecture, the image, the approach on and how we saw the vision of the world as well, that everything that you make collectively and is made of individual autonomy.
Right.
I hope it's not too abstract. I hope I'm managing to explain. So I think the individuality needs to be respected. And out of that individuality, you contribute to a collective approach.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So, but it was, a very interesting. So this was also a pitch, and we won, and thanks to that we could work further in the development. But the trouble was that when you're doing a pitch, you are presenting already a vision and an approach without having the chance to interview everyone in the organization, to really absorb everything. So it can be lucky, you can be lucky and you can be sharp, but sometimes it's, it could be also completely a mistake. Yeah.
Sure. You got to listen to them, right?
Yeah, of course, and I always say to museums, like, I don't think doing a pitch is a good idea, because the thing that we learn the most is by working together, and I personally love working together with organizations, and if I can't do that, then I find it's a pity. Yeah. And the third example I like to show is about the National History Museum. So I like to show you an example that has to do with naming and how the museum tells the story of the Netherlands. So the name was the National History Museum. So, as you know, that is the image that one has for, national history museums.
Classic museum, right?
Yeah, very classic museum, very imperialistic, difficult to approach, and, holding history within the walls. And most of the museums in that sector had to do with history, and again, history, and National Museum American history, and history of Catalonia, and so on, and so on, and so on. So we say those names end up being acronyms, NOM, NH, and things that people find it very hard sometimes to remember, or even to relate to, because it doesn't say anything to you. So the same, we say the name had to have no abbreviation. And we looked, so we proposed to call it IN-NL, in the Netherlands. So everything that had to do was creating already some kind of a storytelling and placing it in the context of the Netherlands. So I will show you some example. So the identity was not the goal in itself, but it was a tool to tell the story of the history. So the history of the Netherlands, and this is in Dutch, so you could construct sentences. So like, for example, Spaniards in the Netherlands, or Batavian in the Netherlands, the work in the Delta in the Netherlands, and then Koning Beatrice in the Netherlands. So this is how it worked, and you could bring it to all kinds of levels. Use business cards to tell the story of particular people or particular happenings. Love in the Netherlands. I'm just going through some of the Garda robots in the Netherlands, and talk about men in the Netherlands, and talk about the men in the Netherlands and how they were, and break it very open. Coffee, the history of coffee, but also bring it to coffee cups and tell the history of coffee in the context of coffee. And these are just some examples.
So basically, we're dealing here with a platform, right?
Exactly.
More than a brand itself.
Yeah, and this is what I'm trying to explain, that our vision to create a brand is just to create a platform. I do not believe that nowadays, in the times that we are in, you can or you should be creating things that are closed. I think you need to create things that are open-ended, that can allow for possibilities within a platform, of course. So, but also I think it was interesting to think that, the history of a country is also told by the beers, and by places, and by the different people, and how you relate to that. So this could be it could lead into endless possibilities of creativity. It's just a starting point, this platform. And it creates a very good structure for storytelling that is way more engaging, and it's more representative of people because it's talking their language. So this was the INNL example. And the third example has to do not so much with museums, but just an idea, as we said before, of the kind of mobile design agency. It's when we created, we were asked to be part of the Beijing Design Museum conference, and we left the conference and we went out of the streets, and we offered local entrepreneurs a logo to make a connection with the people and develop the visual culture, because in China most of the streets is all with red background and white type. So we took one of the tuk-tuks of China, pumped it into a mobile design agency, and off we went on the streets offering entrepreneurs a free logo on the spot. So we created interesting examples and developed more a visual language. So this is just to show you a little bit of our approach that is very much related to the context. And lately, I like to show you the last example, but before I want to give you a little bit of introduction, because we work a lot with millennials, and we are working a lot with younger generations. We conducted research and a lot of tests, a user test with younger audiences, because we find that museums find it very difficult to connect with younger generations. And I remember in a conference at ICOM, someone, when I was presenting about millennials, say, why should we care? They're not going to come to the museums anyway, and they will come back when they have children. And I say to them, well, I think it's very important, because I think that younger generations should be your partners. They should help you drive innovation. They know better and sometimes more accurate what's happening and where we're going towards, that we, and even me, which I'm, a lot older than this generation. So we try to dig into this millennials mindset with an approach not to talk about millennials. You probably know a lot about millennials, this buzzword everywhere, but to give an approach of millennials are the drivers of innovation. So as you know, this generation born between 1980 and 2000 is one of the most important generations in the world in terms of numbers. So it's very diverse within the generation, and are going to become one of the global workforce, and they hate to be called millennials. Compared to baby boomers, for example, who were born between 46 and 1964, which were the challenging the norm, the idealistic, the first ones who showed television. When we went from radio to television, then images started to be part of our culture, and the first computer, and the born of the first mobile telephone, although the relationship with technology is still a bit more difficult. For Generation X,
But the question, baby boomers like to be called baby boomers also?
Well,
We all hate to be under those kinds of, you know,
I think that,
categories.
yeah, sometimes these categories can be a bit annoying because it's putting people into boxes, although I think the social and economic context in which you grow up, it does have some influence, so it's interesting to take into account. It does give some hints, but I think then it comes down to individuals and their particular approach and attitude.
Probably Generation X feel more comfortable with the term because it is kind of sexy, right? Generation X.
Yeah, it's a bit more, yeah, it was, but it was called Generation X because it was like the lost generation. It was when the grunge started and Nirvana, and there was like lack of, we're not interested in anything, because the baby boomers were like the conquerors. It was the hippies. They were like, they wanted to that go across cultural borders, and the Generation X was kind of like this generation from 1965, 1980 that was a bit like, nah, we don't believe in the system and we're a bit again. But it was also the generation that showed the birth of the MTV and this visual culture, pop culture, fame, series, and it was emerging technology. So we were the first generation that had own technology. We had Walkmans, and we could walk around with our music, and this was fantastic. And we had, for the very first time, computers at home, and we could play games on the television with this machine, a Spectrum. I loved it. I had it. And at the time, internet, we saw how the internet was built and how the web was created. But internet was something that you will dial in with this Bluetooth, like, and someone will pick up the phone. You say, hey, hang up, I'm on internet. So, but for millennials, as you already know, most of them have a mobile phone, and their relationship with technology is very strong, and their life has 2 dimensions, and it's kind of like an extension of themselves. It is for all of us, but for them it's even more important, and it's really something that constructs their identity and is helping them to construct their reality. And I think this also opening up many dimensions that we're not so aware of, and the impact they will have. We talk about it, but we just still don't know. So it's a generation that I think, compared to my generation, has a lot more self-reliance. So it's like, okay, it's the end of the 9 to 5, and they hate authority and bosses and cubicles, and they're more into collaborative process, more fluid structures and networks, and they are not such a big believers of corporates. They're more about individuals with this belief in politics and occupancy movements, and about taking actions, being activists, hacking, and not believing so much that corporations should be about profit, but they should be about human collective power, caring, and having a cause. That's why you see so many more millennials becoming entrepreneurs. And this is generating a boom of new ideas. There is so much happening at the moment. All of it you already know. It's creating a really fast culture, fast platform, and fast tools. And I think what's interesting about that is that they are enabling new solutions for the world, because they see a problem and they try to find a solution for that. So they have a very innovative approach. They identify themselves with innovation, and they are driven. I mean, look at how many tech talks right now. Everyone is interested in ideas and sharing ideas, even this platform today, what we're doing today. So I think that millennials, or these younger generations, are very much creative innovators. They not so much want the end product, but the tools to create something new, something they can alter, and something that hopefully it's also tools to create something new, and it's open source. So it's for us, who we work very often with design, with the visualization and the translation of ideas into something tangible. It's no longer about manuals and how you do things and rules. It's more about creating this platforms, as I was showing you before, that can allow for more creativity, that can enable people to be creative and take it wherever they want to take it, but at the same time still part of one visual language. So it's about designing more principles than end results. So it's really changing how you applied your ideas to different. I love this example. For example, you can navigate through the website and choose a color. It's for a record company, and then you have the possibility to have it in different. So these are tools that people can use. It's very simple example, but just to exemplify that what we need to design now is not so much something that is finished, but the tools to create it. And that's why I think very often when I talk to museums, to talk about young audiences as their driving force of innovation, to work with them, to make their experiences more experiential, to be more efficient, to really solve real problems, and to break the bridge between online and offline. There is no such a bridge. It's all part of the one reality. And when I teach in universities, from one day to another, it was like that. And I thought it was very unsocial. And for me, I realized this is the new social. So, and that social Wi-Fi is the oxygen. So we need to also change the way we do things. And this is an example that I will show you to finish the presentation of how we change the design process. And it's more about the process and less about the end result. It's about design, test, iterate, and design again. So we created this Golden Age app to create interactive storytelling, to allow the paintings talk to the audience, to give them a voice. We were asked by the Hermitage Museum in Amsterdam to work with them in this exhibition for the Golden Age. And if any of you are in Amsterdam, I highly recommend you to visit this amazing exhibition showing the brothers and sisters of the Golden Age and how a society had a structure itself by the initiative of the citizens, while in the rest of Europe it was all about the church and kings. And but this exhibition was not highly attended by younger audiences, and we knew many of the stories of the people in the painting and how they relate to each other and how they network it and how the structures of power were constructed. So when we look at the younger audiences and the relationship with mobile phones, we said, okay, let's partner together and let's go from just throwing information in a very linear and boring kind of way to make something that can speak more their language, which is more personal, more emotional, and more straight to the point. And we created this app in which you can actually receive messages by characters in the painting in the way that they are used to is also the way of networking today. So the principle is the same. It's about contacting and interacting with people. It's just that the context is different. So this is how this educational app was developed. So you get messages from people in the painting. It has iBeacons technology. So when you are in front of one painting, you will get messages for the person in the characters in that particular painting. And when you move around, so you can see the conversations about the characters and how they are linked to each other within the room, and you can discover connections and also look into their profiles or get, invitations to, like, someone wants to get a selfie because he was drawn in the painting. So using the language that they use, or we all use, to bring these stories to life, and they were all curated with a curator. So they are all factual and real. And that's it, basically.
Wow, excellent.
I talked very fast.
Okay.
I hope people could follow.
No, it's great. Talk about people. Anna, are we still live? Is this working?
It's still working. We're still live.
It is amazing. I told you it's going to work.
Yeah, technology. It works.
Isn't it? Right? So do we have questions from our audience?
I'm tracking a lot of channels. The first question that I mean, I actually got totally thrown off by that last project because that's so great. I'm so interested in the chat culture. Just had an opportunity to check out the Brooklyn Museum's Ask app that allows you to talk to people and ask questions while you're going through the museum. And I love the idea of when you don't have a staff to be on hand to answer every question, the idea that you can still use the chat platform for creating a meaningful dialogue. And I wonder, I would love to hear about that process with you know, content creation, you know, translating to their language, and you know, the museum's comfort level with you know, taking history and putting it into the language of a millennial.
Yeah, that was a very interesting process actually. In one of the meetups of storytelling that we organized, we had the copywriter to explain how the process went. And I think the good thing was, and what I think is very remarkable, is museums are full with archives. Yeah, so we had a lot of the stories of the people in the painting. They were very well documented back in the days. So we could track everyone, and the curator was a great believer of the project. So what we did, and I think this was a success, and what is the process that we really much feel comfortable with, we did a workshop at the very beginning with everyone involved in the exhibition. To really openly, we had an approach to openly what would be the right approach. So we came out together with this idea of networking. And we say, well, we have the stories, we have the people. It was all about how the citizens structure themselves. So why don't we bring these stories to life? And then so we start working with the copywriter and to really make the stories. And then before it was in the process, we test them with the audience. We did a lot of tests with the stories to fine tune and together with the curator. So I think the key was that we got the copywriter, the audience, and the curator working together to develop those stories. Yeah.
And did it ever? Was there an opening for interaction with the audiences? Is there?
It's hard because that requires a technology that is even higher investment to be able to, and so we couldn't achieve that level of interaction, which would have been amazing. Yeah. Level 2, but what we did, because this was partly funded by the Dutch government, is we developed a technology that other museums can use. So we made it open source.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. We developed also, so there is another experiment that we did with the Van Gogh Museum. You call it iPerform, also with iBeacons technology, giving instructions, performatic instructions instead of paintings to activate the audience. And I show you some images. So that was also done, I believe, with the same technology. So this was really, yeah, for us, this was done by artists and designers in Amsterdam. So you can see some of the commands that you get. So if you're in front of a painting that has grass, you're invited to lay on the ground and feel the grass, and it creates a very interesting dynamic. So you get, you know, people doing things normally they're not allowed to do. So, yeah.
How do you see? I mean, I love this image, you know, of people laying on the floor of the museum, and how that becomes an extension of the brand, right? When people are rethinking their brand, it's always about freshening.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. As I said before, when we approach a brand, we approach it from a very deep in, right? So we look at the kind of behavior we want, and we think about the kind of environment we want to create. So it's about, you know, we want to bring relevance to Van Gogh and who he was, and get people closer to his painting. And we could want to create a free environment, so we develop this technology to facilitate this kind of behavior. But it's coming all part of one main idea. And sometimes you get engaged into a project that only does a fraction of it. But when you start from the beginning, from the naming, finding the name, to bring everything to life, you make everything very so integrated and so cohesive that you have the possibility to create a strong impact. Yeah.
It's fantastic. I love this idea. I mean, it shouldn't be revolutionary, but thinking about like such a detailed behavior you want to see. Like, I would love to walk into my museum and see people laying on the ground, like listening to something, like starting with such a basic human behavior, as opposed to, you know, frequently you go into a brainstorm, we want to see people learn X, Y, and Z, but getting a little more simple about it in order to have a more dynamic or energized interaction.
Because the thing is that what happens is that people start always from the same mental frame. So they arrive to the same kind of solutions. They don't think that so much more can be done within the museum. And then I go back to what I said at the beginning, that maybe then it didn't make sense, but I think the museum should visit people. So there is only something you can do, but the end of what is the impact of what you do happens within the person, in the brain of the person. You can facilitate that, and that mediation, that in between, that translation of what the museum wants and what happens with the audience, that's what I'm interested in articulating. Yeah, and bringing the creativity there. No, what's that? What's happening in the middle that you are making that possible? Yeah.
It's fantastic. I wanted to actually also ask a question. This was the question I wrote down earlier, but seeing the workspace and this open collaborative environment, and I'd love to know if at any point working with museums that you're pulling them out of their workspace, because museums are typically organized as offices and enclosures, and people are very separated. There's frequently siloing that happens, and if you ever, in order to execute a project the way you want to, bringing people into a different space.
Pretty much, we organize a lot of workshops. So we have creative workshops. We encourage people to come to our space, because also we have these tables upstairs. People can take over, so we break out in groups and they can write on the walls and do whatever they want, and then we get together again and share results, and it's really forces them to be completely in another environment. Yeah, and when we can test things there, so for example, this workshop that Hackers and Design Summer School in collaboration with LavaLab did on audio experiences, we could record them. They have the technology to facilitate it. We can tour the space around the artworks. So people made very experimental approaches to that. So they really get out of their comfort zone and their framework of thinking, yeah, in this space. So we are always
Cecilia, I'm curious. You showed in your presentation a slide with some kind of brand ranking where there's state between shell and device, I guess. What was the source of that ranking?
Oh, the global brands, I believe. Let me see. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's in the.
Is this a British ranking or?
Yeah, let me see. I think I have the source here. Yeah, it's rather old, but it's just to make the point.
Yeah, sure.
That really. Hold on, I will go to the. Yeah, Super Brands 2012. Super Brands. Yeah. But I think like the Tate is, in the UK is one of those.
It is amazing as we live in this world surrounded by brands. Do you think we're really beginning to see brands from the cultural sector as valuable assets? Like, you know, if you take, for instance, companies like Coca-Cola or Nike, their brands are more valuable than the sum of the assets of their company.
Yeah.
So do you think that we're going to begin to see cultural brands as valuable as that?
Well,
Or maybe you think that eventually the MAP or MoMA or Guggenheim are already there.
well, I think many of those brands are already there. The thing is that, of course, you know, it has its downsides, and I can tell you my views on that. But the reality is that many people feel identify, they're building their identity around this brand. You're not going to build your identity around Coca-Cola, you know.
Uh-huh.
You're not going to tell a lot about yourself by linking to Coca-Cola or going on social media with Coca-Cola. But people want to be seen in museums, they want to be seen in the way, and it's part of their identity. Now, whether this is helping to keep cultural standards and not this commercialization of culture, which is very shallow, but it really helps develop audiences in the way we want to develop ourselves as human beings and become more enriched by culture in a responsible way. I'm sure there will be many different approaches to that. You know, some will take fast route and others will be only about impact and being fashionable. But the reality is that if you think, for example, about the V&A in London and how they approach the celebrity culture and the role they are playing in the scene of cultural happening, so many museums are becoming more and more important in that respect.
Yeah. And maybe an evidence of this perceived value could be related to the reactions of the public in Britain regarding the sponsorship of BP to British Museum and Tate, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly, because these are, you know, the Tate playing a very important role in Britain's public sphere, and then associating themselves to. So then they've had a strong reaction because people feel very connected.
Yeah, people feel betrayed, right?
Yeah, yeah, it feels like it's part of your cultural imaginary. So, and I think it also has to do that we have two very empty holes in our society. One is by what it used to be church, you know, the social role of church back in the days, and the other one, it was what politics used to be as a mediator between society, and we less and less believe in politics as a good mean, and now we only have reasons to mediate with our society to really be this trustful institution in which we believe they are responsible in the way they do, and we can approach different issues from a more cultural perspective. So, yeah, I think in that sense, museums are becoming more important, yeah, as a leading voice in society, or at least I like to believe that, and I push for that to happen.
Yeah, excellent. So before we go, Anna, do you have any more questions to Cecilia? You eventually need to turn on your microphone, you know.
Thank you. I mean, there's more questions coming, I'm sure, and I hope that we can continue, you know, to talk about all these ideas, because there's a lot, you know, of things coming together in my mind, and I need to go back and look at, you know, your projects again, because they were so different and address different sides of the topic, and so it's really, I think we actually need to wrap before we get deep into another.
Sure. Cecilia, if people want to get in touch with you, how they do? What's your?
Yeah.
Are you on Twitter or email? What?
Yeah, they can email me, Cecilia@lava.nl. So yeah, people can get in touch if they want. I will be, and we also have a LavaLab Twitter account and a Facebook page, so you can follow what we do online. And if you have questions, or anyone is, I'm more than happy to follow up.
So, and you mentioned that you don't believe in boundaries. You're all over the world. So, if people want to make business with you, they can contact you.
Yeah, I always.
You're available for any museum in America.
Exactly. I always say that I'm delocalized, that as long as I'm there at 10 o'clock, when the people require me to be, how I get there and how I do it, that's my problem. That's at my control. So I'll be there at 10 o'clock. I'm always on the move. Yeah.
All right, all right. So thank you all for joining us at the MCN Brandmaster Series. Thank you, Cecilia Martin. It's been a real pleasure. So our series is sponsored by the Media Production and Branding Special Interest Group, co-chaired by Anna Chiaretta Lavatelli and me. Special thanks to Eric Longo, Ryan Dodge, and Anna Ellen Grill. Are we forgetting anybody?
And Scott Sayre.
Scott, of course. Okay, let's wrap it up. See you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Bye. Take care. Ciao.
Bye.